She took an antacid, lay down on the sofa, told her daughter she had eaten something that did not agree with her. She felt a pressure in her chest, not pain exactly, more of a heaviness and a strange discomfort that radiated into her upper back. Her stomach felt unsettled. She was more tired than she could explain. She had been tired for 2 days, actually, in a way that seemed disproportionate to what she had done. She waited for it to pass. She had had indigestion before. This felt like indigestion. Uncomfortable, familiar in a vague and generalized way, the kind of thing that resolves with rest and time. It did not resolve with rest and time. 3 hours later, her daughter found her unresponsive on the sofa. She had had a heart attack, a massive myocardial infarction. And in the 3 hours between the antacid and the emergency call, the window in which treatment could have opened the blocked artery and saved significant heart muscle had closed almost entirely. She survived, with damage that did not have to be that extensive, with a recovery that did not have to be that long, with a life that did not have to be that permanently altered. I'm Dr. Eleanor Bennett. Subscribe to this channel right now, because what I am about to tell you is not supplementary health information. It is the difference between recognizing a heart attack in time and taking an antacid and lying down. Let me start with the fact that changes everything. The crushing chest pain that movies and television have taught us to associate with heart attacks, the dramatic clutching of the left side of the chest, the collapse, the unmistakable agony is one presentation of a heart attack. It is the presentation most common in younger men with significant coronary artery disease and a sudden large blockage. It is not the presentation most common in seniors. It is not the presentation most common in women. And it is not the presentation that sends the most people home from the emergency room thinking they had indigestion. Because by the time someone is clutching their chest in dramatic pain, they are usually already on their way to the hospital. The heart attacks that kill seniors, quietly the ones that are treated with an antacid, that are slept off, that are attributed to stress or a heavy meal or a long week, look nothing like the movie version. They look like indigestion. They look like fatigue. They look like a pulled muscle in the back. They look like a jaw that aches for reasons that seem to have nothing to do with the heart. And they are dismissed every single day by people who would have gone to the emergency room immediately if the pain had been where they expected it to be. That mismatch between expectation and reality, between what a heart attack is supposed to feel like and what it actually feels like in many seniors, is where lives are lost. Let me tell you what a silent or atypical heart attack actually feels like. Not what it looks like on a medical diagram, what it feels like from the inside, in a real body, on an ordinary day. The pressure that is not quite pain. This is the description I hear most often, and it is the one most consistently mistaken for something else. Not a sharp, stabbing pain, a heaviness, a tightness, a sense of pressure in the center of the chest, sometimes described as something sitting on the chest, or as a band being tightened around the rib cage. It may be mild. It may come and go. It may feel exactly like the pressure of a large meal sitting heavily in the stomach. And because it is not sharp, because it does not match the expected template, it is explained away as digestive discomfort, as muscle tension, as stress manifesting physically. The chest is the location where this pressure typically lives, but often it is not the only location, and sometimes it is not the primary location at all. Let me tell you about Patricia. Patricia was 67, healthy by most measures, walking 3 times a week, eating reasonably, managing mild blood pressure with medication. One Saturday afternoon, she developed what she described as a strange heaviness under her breastbone. It was not severe. It did not stop her from moving around the kitchen. It was accompanied by what she described as bloating, a fullness in the upper abdomen that felt like she needed to burp but could not. She had eaten a larger lunch than usual. She took a digestive tablet and sat in the garden. The heaviness persisted for 4 hours. The bloating did not resolve. She began to feel nauseated in a mild, persistent way, and she noticed, around hour 3, that she was sweating slightly, not from exertion or heat, just a fine, unusual dampness on her skin that did not match the cool afternoon. It was her daughter, home from university that weekend, who insisted on calling for help. The paramedics arrived. Patricia's EKG showed unmistakable evidence of an acute myocardial infarction, a heart attack in progress. She was rushed to the hospital. The artery was open. She recovered fully. But the 4 hours she spent in the garden waiting for her indigestion to pass were 4 hours of heart muscle dying that did not need to die. The nausea and the unusual sweating were the signals she had not been told to recognize. The bloating that could not be relieved was not digestive. The heaviness under the breastbone was not food sitting heavily. Her heart was in crisis, and it looked exactly like Saturday afternoon indigestion. Now let me tell you about the symptoms that feel nothing like a heart attack, because they appear in locations that seem to have nothing to do with the heart. The jaw. A dull, achy discomfort in the jaw, sometimes one side, sometimes both, that appears without explanation. Not a toothache, not a jaw joint problem. A diffuse aching that may radiate up from the neck and throat. In a senior who has no recent dental work, no history of jaw problems, and no obvious explanation for sudden jaw discomfort, this symptom deserves serious attention, particularly when it appears alongside any other symptom from this list. The back, specifically the upper back between the shoulder blades, or across the upper shoulders. Not the lower back of arthritis or a muscle strain. The upper back, aching in a way that does not respond to position changes. That is not relieved by lying down or stretching. That seems disconnected from any physical activity that could explain it. Heart pain radiates to the back because the nerves that supply the heart share pathways with the nerves that supply those areas. The brain receives pain signals and attributes them to the region of the body it is most used to associating with those nerves, which is not always the heart. The arm. Not only the left arm in the dramatic Hollywood presentation. Either arm. A heavy, aching, or numb quality in one or both arms, sometimes extending from the shoulder to the elbow, sometimes to the hand that arrives without explanation and persists without a clear positional or mechanical cause. Let me tell you about James. James was 72, a retired engineer, stoic in the specific way that men of his generation often are. For 2 days before the event, he had noticed an ache in his left shoulder that he assumed was from the gardening he had done the previous week. By the second day, the ache had moved, or perhaps he had simply noticed it more into his upper arm. He took ibuprofen. It helped slightly. He told himself he had pulled something. On the morning of the third day, James woke with a profound fatigue, not the tiredness of poor sleep, but a heaviness that made the thought of getting out of bed feel genuinely difficult. He lay there for an hour. When he finally rose, he felt short of breath walking to the bathroom, which he had never experienced before. His wife noticed he was pale. He told her he was fine. He sat at the kitchen table for 20 minutes before she called emergency services against his objections. James had been having a heart attack for approximately 2 days. The shoulder ache had been the early radiation of cardiac pain. The fatigue had been the heart working desperately hard against a partially blocked artery. The breathlessness walking to the bathroom had been the beginning of pulmonary congestion, as the heart's pumping capacity declined. He had attributed every symptom to something ordinary. His stoicism, his deeply held belief that symptoms were not worth mentioning unless they were severe, had nearly killed him. He survived. His heart sustained significant damage, and he told me afterward, in the careful, measured way of a man who does not say things lightly. I thought I was being responsible by not alarming anyone. I did not know I was having a heart attack the whole time. Now let me tell you about women specifically. Because the silent heart attack is not equally distributed, and the data on this is unambiguous and consistently underappreciated. Women over 60 are significantly more likely than men to experience atypical heart attack symptoms. The nausea, the fatigue, the back pain, the jaw ache, the breathlessness, without dramatic chest pain. Women are more likely to delay calling for help. Women are more likely to be misdiagnosed when they do seek care. Women are more likely to be sent home from emergency rooms with a diagnosis of anxiety or gastrointestinal upset when they are actually in the early stages of a cardiac event. And women have higher mortality from heart attacks than men, in part because of this diagnostic gap, and in part because by the time a female heart attack is correctly recognized and treated, more time has passed and more damage has occurred. This is not a historical problem. It is happening in emergency rooms right now. And the defense against it is a senior woman who walks in knowing exactly what to say. The words that change outcomes are these: I may be having a heart attack. I want to be evaluated for a cardiac event. Not, I think I have indigestion but wanted to check. Not, I have been feeling off. I may be having a heart attack. I want to be evaluated for a cardiac event. Those words trigger an immediate, protocol-driven response, an EKG within minutes, cardiac enzyme blood tests, a proper evaluation. They are the words too many senior women never say, because they walked in describing indigestion and were treated for indigestion and went home to wait and see. There is one group of seniors for whom the silent heart attack is most silent of all, and whose risk is highest and most consistently underestimated. Seniors with diabetes. Diabetes causes a specific type of nerve damage over time, autonomic neuropathy, that can affect the nerves responsible for transmitting pain signals from the heart. In a senior with long-standing diabetes, the nerve pathways that would carry the chest pain signal to conscious awareness may be partially or fully impaired. The heart can be in acute crisis, an artery closing, muscle dying, the cardiac electrical system destabilizing while the person feels nothing that they would recognize as a cardiac symptom. What they feel instead is profound, sudden fatigue, a vague, generalized sense of unwellness they cannot name. Nausea. Occasionally a mild and nonspecific discomfort that they attribute to blood sugar fluctuation or a medication effect. Nothing that triggers the mental category of heart attack. Nothing that sends them to the emergency room. This is why seniors with diabetes who experience sudden, unexplained, disproportionate fatigue, particularly combined with any other unusual symptom, and particularly in the context of cardiovascular risk factors, deserve a cardiac evaluation rather than a rest and wait approach. Their heart may be sending the only signal it can send through impaired nerves, and that signal is easy to miss, precisely because it does not hurt. Dorothy was 73, a diabetic for 11 years, who sat down in the middle of her usual morning walk because her legs suddenly felt too heavy to continue. Not painful, not cramping. Just too heavy, combined with a tiredness that arrived in seconds and was entirely unlike anything she had felt on any previous walk. She sat on a bench for 15 minutes, felt slightly better, walked home, and lay down. Her neighbor, who happened to call to confirm their afternoon plans, heard something wrong in her voice and came over immediately. Dorothy was in the middle of a large anterior myocardial infarction. She had felt no chest pain at all. She had felt only leg heaviness, fatigue, and a vague wrongness that she had been about to attribute to poor sleep and high blood sugar. Her diabetic neuropathy had muted the cardiac pain signal completely. Her heart had been speaking the only language her damaged nerves could transmit, and the language was fatigue, not pain. She reached the hospital in time because her neighbor heard something wrong in her voice, not because she recognized a heart attack, because someone outside her heard what she could not see in herself. If you have diabetes, this section of this video is the one I need you to remember most clearly. Your heart attack may not hurt. It may feel like a bad day. It may feel like blood sugar trouble. It may feel like tiredness. And the decision to call emergency services must be made on a lower threshold of certainty than the person without neuropathy, because the certainty your nerves would otherwise provide may simply not arrive. Now let me give you the practical framework, because this video is not designed to make you afraid every time you feel bloated after dinner. It is designed to help you tell the difference between ordinary digestive discomfort and the warning signs that deserve immediate action. The questions that matter are these. Is the discomfort or pressure in the chest, upper abdomen, jaw, back, or arm new meaning? It is not a symptom you recognize from a pattern of previous experience. Does it persist for more than a few minutes without obvious resolution? Is it accompanied by any of the following? Unusual sweating, not explained by heat or exertion, nausea that does not resolve, shortness of breath that is disproportionate to what you are doing, a sense of impending doom or profound wrongness that you cannot name but cannot dismiss, lightheadedness or near fainting? If the answer to the first question is yes, and the answer to any part of the second question is yes, do not take an antacid. Do not lie down and wait. Do not call your regular doctor's office for an appointment. Call emergency services. Now, while it is still happening, because the window in which a blocked coronary artery can be opened and heart muscle can be saved is measured in minutes to hours. Every minute of that window spent waiting, deciding, hoping the antacid will work is a minute of heart muscle that does not come back. The damage from a heart attack is not delivered all at once at the moment of recognition. It accumulates from the moment the artery closes. And the senior who calls immediately, who is in the ambulance while the event is still evolving, has a fundamentally different outcome than the senior who waited 4 hours on the sofa. Let me tell you specifically what happens in the time between a heart attack beginning and treatment being delivered. Because understanding this timeline is what makes the urgency real rather than abstract. When a coronary artery closes, when a clot forms and blocks the blood supply to a section of heart muscle, that muscle begins to die within minutes, not hours, minutes. The damage is not fixed and permanent from the first second. It progresses. It accumulates. It spreads through the affected region of muscle over the course of the hours that follow. And the interventions that can stop or reverse that progression, opening the artery through a catheter procedure or dissolving the clot with medication, are most effective earliest. Their benefit decreases with every hour that passes. The medical phrase is time is muscle. It is not a metaphor. Each hour of delay in treatment corresponds to a measurable additional amount of cardiac muscle that does not survive. The senior who is treated within the first 60 to 90 minutes of symptom onset has a dramatically different outcome from the senior who is treated 4 hours later, not because the treatments are different, but because the amount of muscle that has died by the time treatment is delivered determines how much heart function remains afterward. 4 hours of waiting on the sofa translates, in cardiac terms, to 4 hours of a region of the heart receiving no blood flow. By the time the artery is opened, the damage that accumulated in those 4 hours is permanent. The heart function loss in those 4 hours does not come back. This is why the senior who calls emergency services immediately, who is in the ambulance while the event is still in its early stages, has access to interventions that actually change the outcome. And the senior who waits until the symptoms become unmistakable, until the pain is severe, until the nausea is incapacitating, until certainty arrives at the hospital with a head start, that belongs to the damage, not to the treatment. The antacid is not the problem. Uncertainty is not the problem. Caution is not the problem. The problem is waiting for certainty, waiting for the pain to become unambiguous, waiting to be sure, waiting until there is no question when certainty in cardiac events often arrives too late. Call first, be evaluated, be told it was indigestion. If that is what the tests show, go home relieved. That outcome is infinitely better than the alternative. The woman who took the antacid and lay down on the sofa survived, but the damage her heart sustained in those 3 hours left her with a limitation she will carry for the rest of her life. Not because she was careless, because nobody had ever told her that indigestion and a heart attack can feel exactly the same, and that the only way to tell them apart is a test, not a weight. Now you know. The question is what you do with that knowledge the next time the pressure arrives, the next time the back aches without reason, the next time the jaw hurts and the nausea will not quite resolve. Do not take the antacid and lie down. Call. Be sure. That is the decision this video is asking you to make right now, before it is needed, so that it is already made when it matters. Share this with every senior you love. Subscribe to this channel. And if anything in this video sounds like what you are feeling right now, stop watching. Call emergency services. The video will be here when you are safe.